The air in the sanguine great hall was thick, not with blood, but with the suffocating weight of history and expectation. Princess Lyra of the Nightwing clan stood on the dais, her immense, obsidian wings folded tight against the silver armor that encased her slender form. The armor was a gesture, a subtle, deadly hint that she was present under duress. Her crimson eyes, usually bright with cold amusement, were dull tonight. Below her, the assembled vampire nobility, hundreds of years old, draped in velvet and judgment, waited for the affirmation of the greatest political merger in a millennium. They waited for her "I do." Her mother, Queen Seraphina, a figure carved from cold marble and immense power, stood beside her. Lyra, Seraphina's voice, a low rumble that carried perfectly across the hall, was a clear command. "It is time. Prince Kalen awaits your vow." Lyra looked at Prince Kalen. He was handsome in the tradition of their kind, sharp angles, pale skin, and an air of entitled mastery. He offered her a wolfish, possessive smile. Oh, the thought was a stone in her gut. She had endured 200 years of lessons, politics, and power plays, all leading to this moment where her free will was meant to dissolve into the service of the state. She hated it. She hated him. She hated the predictable future he represented. She stepped forward, her silver-shod boot clicking once on the polished obsidian floor, a sound that drew every breath in the immense room. "I refuse." The silence that followed was so absolute it seemed to crackle. 100 generations of rigid court etiquette shattered in that single, calm utterance. Seraphina's perfect composure fractured for a split second, her eyes widening in disbelief. Kalen's confident smile curdled into a furious snarl. "You dare." Kalen hissed, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his ceremonial blade. "I dare," Lyra repeated, her voice now ringing with unexpected strength. "I will not be a political pawn, Kalen. Your dynasty does not interest me. Find another prize." The ensuing chaos was immediate and visceral. Shouts of outrage, curses, and the deep, angry flapping of wings against stone. Seraphina moved swiftly, placing herself between Lyra and the furious prince. "Silence. This is not over. Lyra, you will report to the Midnight Tower immediately." Just as Seraphina turned to physically escort her daughter away, a sound unlike any the vampires had ever heard ripped through the great hall. It wasn't a roar or a blast, it was a tearing sound like wet silk being violently shredded in the sky. All the high Gothic stained glass windows along the western wall suddenly pulsed with a blinding, sickly green light. Then the world tilted. A section of the vaulted ceiling directly over the entrance didn't crack, it simply vanished. It became a swirling, impossibly luminous vortex of green and gold, humming with the sound of 1,000 rushing winds. It was the color of mortal sunlight filtered through poison, a color that shouldn't exist in their perpetually twilight realm. It was the veil, the ancient, impenetrable magical barrier that separated the vampire territories from the mortal world, and it was violently, terrifyingly open. A moment later, a dark shape tumbled out of the swirling rupture. It was a human shape, but it was tumbling end over end, followed by a shower of sharp stone and something made of brightly colored cloth and metal. The figure crashed onto the marble steps leading up to the dais with a sickening thud. The green light vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving a smoking, ragged hole in the ceiling where the veil had been. The vampire nobles froze, their political vendetta forgotten. An intrusion. Mortal. This was unprecedented. Queen Seraphina raised a hand, her power already gathering, ready to vaporize the trespasser. Lyra, however, felt a shock run through her that had nothing to do with fear. It was a powerful, magnetic pull, a sensation she had never experienced in her 2 centuries of calculated indifference. She lowered her wings slightly and stepped around her mother. The human lay still, groaning softly, sprawled amongst the wreckage of his fall. He was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, dressed in strange, durable fabric, navy cargo pants and a dark fleece jacket, covered in dirt. He wore a heavy, tactical-looking backpack, laden with pockets and straps, which seemed to be the source of some of the scattered metal equipment. His face was smudged, but his skin was a healthy, sun-kissed tan, and his hair was short and practical. He looked completely, utterly out of place. He was a creature of daylight thrown into a world of eternal night. He opened his eyes. They were a startling, clear shade of hazel, flecked with gold, the very color of the weak, fleeting dawn they only heard of in ancient lore. He blinked, clearly confused and in pain, his focus settling on the most terrifying armored and winged creature in the room, Princess Lyra. Elias Vance, former military surveyor, now deeply lost and concussed, saw only a woman in extraordinary silver armor and a long flowing crimson dress, framed by massive black wings. She looked like a goddess of war from a forgotten mythology. He tried to speak but only managed a faint, whispered question. "W. Where am I? Lyra watched the fear, the confusion, and the sheer human fragility in his gaze. She watched the way his chest rose and fell quickly. He was so utterly alive. Her heart, a cold, dry organ for so long, seemed to beat for the first time. The arrogance, the ennui, the political weariness, it all melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of immediate, fierce possession. This human, this glorious mistake was hers. He was the perfect, irrefutable reason. Serafina was poised to strike, her lips pulling back in a silent snarl. Kalen was lunging forward, blade flashing, eager to prove his worth by eliminating the threat. Lyra raised her hand, a single sharp gesture that froze both her mother and her rejected fiancé in their tracks. Her voice, when she spoke, was no longer the voice of a rebellious princess, but the voice of a future queen, absolute and commanding. She looked directly at the bewildered human, Elias Vance, whose eyes held the color of the morning she had never seen, and delivered the single earth-shattering statement that silenced the vampires and sealed her fate. I will marry this one. The ensuing silence was even deeper than before. The air had gone from thick to poisonous. Kalen's blade dropped, clanging against the marble. Serafina stood rigid, her eyes fixed on her daughter as if seeing a stranger. Lyra had refused the most powerful, suitable vampire suitor in the realm moments ago. Now she had chosen a random, concussed human who had literally fallen out of the ceiling. It was madness. It was treason. It was exactly what she needed. Elias, still unable to fully comprehend the armor, the wings, or the hundreds of fanged faces staring at him, instinctively focused on the one person who had just spoken his fate. He didn't understand the question or the statement, but he saw the dangerous, intoxicating intensity in her crimson eyes. His pragmatic mind screamed danger, but something else, a primal curiosity, surged. He pushed himself up onto one elbow, wincing, and gave the only answer his shocked mind could formulate, a simple nod of bewildered, terrified acceptance. Lyra's lips curled into a slow, breathtaking smile, a smile of victory and pure, wild mischief. The game had officially begun. She had her prize and her life would never be boring again. Now she just had to figure out how to keep her new fiancé alive in a court that was already plotting his swift, painful execution. The sudden declaration had paralyzed the Great Hall, but Queen Serafina was not one to remain frozen for long. Her voice, when she spoke, was dangerously low, slicing through the stunned silence. Lyra Nightwing, you dare make a mockery of our customs, our alliances, and my authority for a common mortal filth who literally just dropped out of the sky. Lyra stepped down from the dais, her movements fluid and utterly deliberate, landing beside the still disoriented Elias. She placed a possessive, shielded hand on his shoulder, a silent warning to everyone present. He is not common, Mother. He is the one who breached the veil, a feat no one has accomplished in the recorded history of the clans. This is not a man, this is an event. And since I am commanded to take a husband for the stability of the realm, I shall take the most powerful event I can find. Prince Kalen recovered fastest, his face a mask of wounded pride and venomous rage. He breached the veil by accident, Princess. He is a clumsy animal. And he carries no power, no lineage, no status. He is unacceptable. Acceptance is no longer your concern, Prince, Lyra retorted, her eyes flashing. She turned her attention back to Elias, who looked like he was fighting the urge to flee. What is your name, mortal? Elias, he whispered, his eyes wide as he glanced from the princess to the hundreds of hostile faces and the massive wings that shadowed them all. Elias Vance. And I swear I have no idea how I got here. I was surveying a sinkhole in Nevada. The name, Nevada, meant nothing to the vampires, only confirming his alien origin. Serafina raised her hand, a vortex of dark purple energy beginning to coil around her fingers. Enough of this farce. This creature is a security threat. He dies now, Lyra. No. Lyra's voice was sharp. She looked at her mother, not with rebellion but with calculating authority. He is under my protection and his presence is clearly a sign. He will undergo the trials of sovereignty. If he survives the trial, he is mine. If he fails, then you may execute him. The trials of sovereignty. It was an ancient formality, a series of impossible physical and political tests reserved for foreign dignitaries seeking alliance. Tests designed to weed out the weak and incompetent. No human had ever faced them. It was a death sentence, but one that bought Lyra time. Serafina lowered her hand slowly, the energy dissipating. The logic, twisted as it was, appealed to her sense of ancient law. The trials? Very well. You will face them. But they begin at the next nightfall. Until then, he is to be imprisoned in the Midnight Tower, guarded by my elite. No contact. And Lyra, one wrong move and I will execute him myself, trials or no. Lyra knew this was the best she could hope for, The Midnight Tower was the most secure place in the realm, but also the most private. She had bought herself 18 hours. The air inside the Midnight Tower was sterile and cold, smelling faintly of ozone and old magic. Elias was thrown into a massive bare stone cell. His backpack, the precious contents of his world, was tossed in after him. He was alone, bruised, and utterly terrified. He took a deep, shaky breath, fighting the rising panic. Nevada sinkhole to Vampire Castle. It sounded like a bad fever dream. He immediately went to his backpack. This wasn't just camping gear. It was specialized, military-grade surveying equipment, high-frequency transmitters, and mapping software. He needed to understand how the veil worked, how it opened, and how to get back. He pulled out a small, highly sensitive spatial anomaly detector. The machine immediately began to scream, its tiny screen flashing red. The readings were off the charts, a sheer concentration of interdimensional leakage. He tried to calibrate it, but the magical interference was too great. Just as he was trying to make sense of the data, a faint scraping sound came from the high, narrow window, a detail too small for a human to escape through, but perhaps not for a vampire. Lyra, wearing a simple hooded traveling cloak over her armor, slipped silently into the cell, landing lightly beside him. "You are not supposed to be here," Elias managed, his voice hoarse. "My mother's rules are merely suggestions when the stakes are high," Lyra replied, her eyes scanning the cell, the shadows, the ceiling. She held a vial of thick, dark liquid. "Drink this." "What is it?" "It will sustain you through the trials. It is blood, a highly concentrated, fortified serum, mixed with my own trace energy. It will heal your internal bruising and give you a fraction of a vampire's speed and strength for a short time. Do not refuse, Elias. If you fail the trials, they will feed you to the night hounds. And I refuse to lose my husband before I even possess him." Elias hesitated, looking at the vial. He had always been a man of logic and practicality, but logic had failed him the moment he fell through the sky. Survival was paramount. He uncorked the vial and drank it quickly. It tasted metallic, sweet, and unbelievably invigorating. A strange warmth spread through his core, and the pain in his ribs instantly subsided. "Thank you," he murmured, surprised. "Gratitude is premature. Now show me," she commanded, pointing to his backpack. "That thing you wear." The humans I have studied in ancient texts carried only crude weaponry. "What is this?" Elias, seeing the deep, almost scientific curiosity in her eyes, realized this was his chance. He needed to prove his value, not just his novelty. He pulled out a high-resolution thermal imaging scope. "This is a thermal scope," he explained, turning it on. The dark, cold stone walls of the cell immediately sprang to life in vibrant blues and reds. "It reads heat signatures. Every life form has one." Lyra gasped, truly shocked. She brought her face close to the lens, examining the intricate, glowing display. "You can see what the naked eye cannot? You see the very life force leaving a body?" "In a way, yes," Elias confirmed, pointing it at the hidden crack high up in the wall. "See that bright red flicker? A guard is standing outside the wall, hidden behind a cloaking stone, but his body heat is visible." Lyra stared at the image, her lips parting slightly. It was a power unlike any magic she knew, mechanical, pure, and utterly revealing. For the first time she saw that Elias was more than just a lucky mistake. He was a key to a completely different form of power. She quickly dropped her voice. "The trials are designed for us. You will face a shadow warrior in complete darkness, navigate an illusion labyrinth, and solve a political riddle of succession. The scope can help you track the warrior's heat, and perhaps see the real pathways in the illusion, as illusions distort light, not heat." Elias looked at her, his pragmatic fear warring with a growing sense of dangerous intrigue. "You are coaching me to pass a test that is supposed to kill me. I chose you. I do not tolerate poor judgment, especially my own," Lyra said, her gaze intense. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers cold against his warm skin. Her touch was not loving but fiercely proprietary. "They are watching, Elias. Every faction, every disgruntled courtier. They want you dead to prove my folly. You must not simply survive the trials, you must dominate them. You must make them believe you are a source of unparalleled power. And if I succeed? What happens then?" Elias asked, feeling the strange, charged energy between them intensify. Lyra gave him a dark, confident smile. "Then we are married. And we survive the next attempt on our lives. In this court, marriage is not an ending, Elias. It is simply the opening salvo of a much larger war." She spent the next hour reviewing his basic equipment. The topographical mapping software he had on a durable tablet, which she found fascinating, the frequency emitters and the chemical analysis kits. She realized this man, Elias Vance, was a warrior of knowledge, not muscle, and she began to craft a strategy that leveraged his unique, mechanical magic against their ancient, blood-based powers. The moment before she left, she pressed a small, intricately carved silver whistle into his hand. "If the guards come before the sun rises, blow this. It will summon Valerius, my most trusted advisor. He is old and highly suspicious but utterly loyal to me. He is the only other soul in this palace who knows you are here now." With a quick, silent flap of her dark wings, she was gone, leaving Elias alone with his strange equipment, the lingering metallic taste of vampire blood, and the terrifying knowledge that he was about to face a political trial for his life, a trial only made possible by a vampire princess's impulsive decision to marry a human she had just met. He checked his thermal scope one last time, the cold stone walls a false comfort against the vibrant red pulse of the hidden guard. His focus was now razor-sharp. He had to survive. Not just for himself, but because he was morbidly curious to see what kind of war his terrifying, beautiful fiancée intended to start. The trial arena was carved deep beneath the midnight tower, a vast, echoing cavern lit only by flickering braziers that cast deep, dancing shadows. Queen Seraphina sat high on a throne of black basalt, flanked by the Grand Council, ancient vampires whose judgment was cold and absolute. Prince Kalen stood nearby, radiating malice, his eyes never leaving Elias. Elias stood in the center, looking small and distinctly mortal in his dirt-stained clothes. He was allowed to carry his backpack, a concession Lyra had fought for, claiming his tools of the mortal world were essential to his unique form of power. He felt the residual strength from the serum coursing through him, a barely contained energy that felt alien but useful. The first trial, Queen Seraphina's voice boomed, the test of shadows. You will face our shadow warrior, Corvin, in absolute darkness. Survive for 10 rotations and you pass. The braziers extinguished instantly. The cavern plunged into a blackness so profound it felt like a physical weight. Elias's human eyes, even with the vampire serum, were useless. Silence descended, broken only by the faint, rhythmic sound of a heart beating too fast, his own. He didn't hesitate. He reached into his backpack, pulling out the thermal scope. He flipped it on and the world transformed. The cavern, previously black, was now a landscape of thermal hues. The cold stone walls were blue, the metal gratings were green, and the vampire spectators high above were vivid red silhouettes. And directly in front of him, a massive, muscular figure, Corvin the Shadow Warrior, glowed intensely white-hot, ready to spring. Corvin, cloaked in magical darkness, assumed he was invisible. 10 rotations, Corvin's voice hissed, amplified by the darkness. I give you 5 seconds, mortal. Corvin charged. Lyra, watching from the council platform, held her breath. But Elias moved. Not with vampire speed, but with the precise, practiced economy of a military strategist. Corvin's attack was a wide, sweeping blow designed to disorient and decapitate. Elias had seen it coming a full 2 seconds before impact. He didn't use a sword, he used his training. He dropped low, dodging the swipe, and immediately struck back not at the body, but at the Shadow Warrior's knee with the hard, metal base of his heavy-duty tripod. Clang. The hit was solid. Corvin gasped in shock, stumbling back, clutching his knee. He was not injured but completely unnerved. His opponent had seen him and seen him clearly. Elias didn't wait. He activated a small, handheld ultrasonic emitter he usually used to measure subterranean fissures. He pointed the device at the ceiling and cranked the frequency up to an unbearable pitch, silent to human ears, but devastating to the sensitive hearing of the vampires. A collective shriek of pain erupted from the spectating nobility. They clutched their ears, their sensory systems overwhelmed by the piercing noise. Even Queen Seraphina winced, her regal composure shattering. Corvin, momentarily paralyzed by the sonic assault, roared in confusion. Elias, now using the thermal scope like a targeting sight, quickly pulled out a flare, not a signal flare, but an intensely bright high-magnesium chemical one he used for signaling in canyons. He tossed it high into the air. The flare ignited. The cavern was filled with blinding, mortal white light. The vampires, creatures of perpetual night, screamed and shielded their eyes, their pupils instantly contracting painfully. Corvin was suddenly visible, stunned, disarmed, and staggering in the overwhelming light. 5 seconds are up, Elias stated, his voice calm despite his racing heart. He had not survived by fighting like them. He had survived by fighting against their nature. Seraphina slammed her fist on the basalt armrest. The trial is ended. He passes. Her voice was strained, laced with fury at the unexpected spectacle. Elias had not just survived. He had humiliated one of her best warriors and caused mass physical distress using nothing but primitive human tools. Kalen was livid. This is a perversion. He cheated. He exploited our weaknesses. He adapted, Lyra interrupted coolly, her eyes shining with triumph. The rules state he must survive 10 rotations. They do not forbid him from using his resources, however unconventional. The Shadow Warrior was defeated by the light. A weakness of the Nightwing clan, not the mortal. The council, seeing the tactical brilliance in Lyra's defense, reluctantly murmured their agreement. The second trial, the Labyrinth of Whispers. This was a psychological and magical test. A maze designed to prey on the entrant's deepest fears through illusion and hypnotic suggestion. Elias was placed in a dark, shifting corridor. Walls warped, impossible paths appeared, and the chilling voices of his forgotten life began to whisper. You abandoned us, Elias. You left the team in the canyon. He clutched the thermal scope. Lyra had warned him. Illusions distort light, but often fail to create thermal differences. He looked through the lens. The walls still seemed to writhe and shift in his peripheral vision, but through the scope, the real path, the one with the consistently cold stone, was a clear blue line amidst the illusory red and orange traps. He ignored the whispers and the phantom shapes. He moved quickly, using the blue thermal pathway as his infallible guide. The maze was designed to take hours of desperate, fear-induced struggle. Elias walked it in 12 minutes. He emerged from the exit, a simple stone arch, into the arena, brushing dust off his cargo pants, looking bored. The council was stunned into silence. Lyra allowed herself a small, proprietary smirk. Impossible, Kalen muttered, his disbelief turning into cold certainty. He is carrying some form of high-level light magic. He must be searched and stripped of his accursed tools. The trials are underway, Lyra countered sharply. The rules of engagement cannot be altered mid-test, Prince. You worry for his power because it is a power you do not understand. The third and final trial, the riddle of succession. This was the true test of intellect and political cunning. Elias was presented with a scroll detailing an impossibly tangled, centuries-old political crisis involving land rights, blood debt, and an exiled clan. To pass, he had to provide a resolution that satisfied all three major factions involved without plunging the realm into civil war. Elias had been given a highly simplified annotated version of vampire history by Lyra during their secret meeting, but the problem was still overwhelmingly complex, layered with rituals and ancient sleights. He sat at a low stone table, pulling out his tablet and stylus. Instead of reading the scroll again, he opened his mapping software. He began inputting the data Lyra had given him, the location of the disputed lands, the current geopolitical borders, and the economic dependencies of the three factions. The Nightwings, Lyra's clan rich in magic, the Stormbloods, Kalen's clan rich in military strength, and the exiled Shadow Walkers rich in ancient lore but landless. He didn't read the problem as a riddle. He read it as a resource allocation crisis. He used the tablet to create three overlapping Venn diagrams: needs, assets, and debts. He saw that the Nightwings needed the Shadow Walkers' ancient lore to stabilize the Veil, the Stormbloods needed the Nightwings' vast stores of concentrated energy, and the Shadow Walkers simply needed land that wasn't magically tainted. Elias looked up from the screen, realizing the answer was not in blood or magic but in trade. The solution is a triad exchange, Elias announced clearly, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. He spoke to Seraphina. The Queen grants the exiled Shadow Walkers uncontested, non-magical territory, the barren, mountainous region in the east, which provides a natural, defensible border. A gasp ran through the room. This was an unheard-of concession. In return, Elias continued, looking directly at Kalen, the Shadow Walkers provide their ancient, sealed lore regarding the Veil's stability to the Queen's Council, granting the Nightwings unmatched knowledge. Furthermore, Kalen's Stormbloods are granted a monopoly on refining and distributing the Nightwing's concentrated energy stores, solidifying their wealth and control over the resource infrastructure. In short, knowledge for land, land for territory, and territory for wealth. All three clans receive their primary tangible need, and the realm gains a stable border and crucial stability of the Veil. The solution was audacious, balanced, and perfectly logical. It sidestepped centuries of emotional baggage by focusing purely on economic and strategic necessity. Kalen looked furious, his fists clenched. But Seraphina's eyes, fixed on the human, had narrowed in a mixture of resentment and undeniable respect. This was the work of a supreme strategist. The mortal passes, Seraphina finally stated, her voice heavy with the weight of her decision. The council nodded in grim, unanimous agreement. The trials were over. Lyra walked down to the arena floor, her face triumphant. She stopped in front of Elias, who was catching his breath, the thermal scope still clutched in his hand. You passed, Elias Vance. You survived the darkness, the fear, and the politics, she said, her voice low. You are a creature of formidable and terrifying efficiency. And now you are mine. She offered him her hand. As he took it, she added, sotto voce, Kalen's rage is a tangible weapon now. My mother is suspicious. Your reward is now your immediate danger. Welcome to my life, husband. The vampires watched as the powerful princess and the fragile, victorious human walked out of the arena side by side. The marriage ceremony would follow swiftly, a forced legal bond, but one that cemented Elias not just as Lyra's choice, but as the new, volatile and deeply unsettling power factor in the court. The marriage ceremony was not one of celebration, but of cold, strategic necessity. It took place 3 nights after the trials, a private, hastily arranged affair held in the Queen's private chapel, surrounded by only the most powerful and most hostile members of the court. Lyra wore the traditional wedding attire, deep crimson velvet, laced with silver threads, and the ancestral diamond diadem that signified her status as heir. Elias wore a borrowed suit of dark, heavy silk that felt absurdly formal given the circumstances. They stood before Queen Seraphina, who acted as the presiding minister, her expression grim. The vows were not of love or companionship, but of fealty and mutual strategic protection. Princess Lyra Nightwing, Seraphina droned, her voice devoid of warmth, do you accept this mortal, Elias Vance, as your chosen consort, swearing to protect him as your own power and utilize him for the sole benefit of the realm? I do, Lyra affirmed, her voice clear and strong. Elias Vance, mortal of the Sun World, Seraphina continued, addressing the human with undisguised disdain, do you accept Princess Lyra Nightwing as your sovereign, swearing absolute loyalty, and pledging your life and unique abilities to the defense and prosperity of the Nightwing clan? Elias looked at Lyra. Her eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, held a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher, perhaps anxiety, perhaps hope. He was a prisoner bound by survival, but he was also inexplicably drawn to the fierce loyalty he saw beneath her armor. I do, he replied. The moment Seraphina finished the rites, a cheerless, polite applause rose from the assembled vampires. Prince Kalen, standing near the back, did not clap. He simply gave Elias a look of pure, concentrated enmity, a silent promise of future violence. Lyra and Elias were immediately escorted to the royal apartments in the main palace, luxurious, vast, and silent. This was the most dangerous part, the hours of shared privacy, where their political alliance had to transform into something believable for the spies and magic watching them. We are married, Lyra stated, shedding her heavy velvet cloak and looking suddenly vulnerable in her gown. She moved to the enormous window, where the perennial twilight of their realm offered no comfort. This means you are now under my direct, immediate protection, but it also means that Kalen and my mother can no longer simply execute you. They have to prove treason first, which is a complicated process. Elias set his precious backpack down and began examining the room with a small, discreet sensor. They will be listening, I assume. Every stone, every shadow, Lyra confirmed. We must look like a newly married couple. They expect us to consummate the union to solidify the blood bond. It is a necessary fiction. Elias stopped his scanning. A necessary fiction. Right. Look, I understand the tactical necessity of this marriage, Lyra. But I'm not playing house. My priority is finding out how I breached the veil and how to get back to my world. Lyra turned from the window, her expression hardening. Your priority is my priority, Elias. And your presence here is no accident. The veil does not simply tear open. I believe your human technology, those strange tools you wield, are the key to this instability. She approached his backpack, pointing to the high-frequency antenna sticking out of a side pocket. Show me. Elias, seeing no way around it, pulled out his spatial anomaly detector and the high-powered transmitter. He showed her the frantic readings, the constant leakage of magical energy, the distortion of space. My theory, Elias explained, tapping his tablet, is that my equipment, specifically the high-frequency waves, somehow resonates with the magical signature of the veil, causing a localized rupture. I was surveying a geological anomaly, maybe the veil's membrane was already thin there. I didn't tear the veil, I just pinged it too hard. Lyra's eyes widened with a terrifying realization. If your tools can tear it open, they can tear it wide open. Or they can close it forever. She moved to a hidden compartment in the wall, pulling out an ancient scroll, its parchment brittle with age, the one mentioned in the riddle of succession. She began deciphering the faded runes. This is the ancient lore I bartered the land for, Lyra whispered, tracing a symbol. It speaks of the veil's stability being tied to this sanguine heart's alignment, a magical energy source. But here, it mentions a prophecy. She translated the runes slowly, her voice hushed. When the night heart trembles, the veil shall weaken. Only the mortal born with eyes of dawn, carrying the iron voice that echoes the earth, can seal the wound. But in sealing it, the mortal born will drain the night, condemning the realm to eternal twilight, or be consumed entirely by the veil's fury. She looked up at Elias, her crimson eyes suddenly filled with genuine fear. Elias, you are the mortal born with eyes of dawn, the hazel color of the morning. Your equipment, the iron voice that echoes the earth, is what caused the breach. You are the key. If you try to go home by using your technology to close the veil, you might destroy my entire realm. Or you will die in the attempt. Elias felt a cold dread sink into his bones. His accidental journey was not just a personal mishap, it was a potentially catastrophic, world-ending event. He was either the savior or the destroyer of Lyra's entire world. A soft knock came at the door. Princess, came the dry, ancient voice of Lyra's advisor, Valerius. Prince Kalen has insisted on sending a wedding gift. It is an enchanted mirror, said to reveal the truth of a couple's bond. Lyra cursed under her breath. Kalen's ploy. The mirror is a lie detector tuned to emotional honesty. He wants to prove our bond is purely political, proof of treason. She gave Elias a fierce, desperate look. Listen to me, Elias. We need to buy time and we need this political fiction to be airtight. Kalen and my mother must see a shared passion, a genuine depth of connection, even if it is built on strategy and fear. Elias understood immediately. The time for tactical withdrawal was over. They were now operating under high-stakes surveillance, and their lives depended on selling a lie with absolute conviction. He was a survivor, and Lyra was the most compelling reason to survive he had ever encountered. He grabbed Lyra's arms, pulling her close, not gently, but with the controlled, intense strength the serum had given him. I won't destroy your world, Lyra, but you need to trust me with the truth. All of it. Lyra looked into his hazel eyes, the eyes of dawn, and felt a sudden, electric surge of emotion that went beyond strategy. She was a princess who had refused marriage for 200 years because she refused to be controlled. This human, this chaotic mistake, was the only one who had ever made her feel both intensely vulnerable and utterly powerful. She needed him. She genuinely, terrifyingly needed him. I trust you, Elias Vance, she murmured, her voice thick with the gravity of her statement. We will face them together. Valerius's knock came again, firmer this time. Lyra pushed Elias back slightly, her eyes glittering with dark anticipation. The mirror is here, my lord and lady. Shall I admit the witness? Lyra looked at Elias, an unmistakable hunger in her gaze, a blend of strategy, fear, and something dangerously close to real affection. Elias, feeling the rush of adrenaline and the strange, invigorating power from the serum, realized that the life of a surveyor in Nevada was infinitely dull compared to the life he was about to lead. Admit him, Valerius, Lyra commanded, her voice dropping to a seductive purr that would carry through the walls. Tell Prince Kalen that the Nightwing clan's new union is ready to be inspected. Valerius, Lyra's advisor, entered the royal apartment, followed by two stern-faced guards who carried a full-length ornate mirror framed in cold obsidian. The mirror was placed in the center of the room, facing the newlyweds. This is the mirror of aligned hearts, my princess, Valerius announced, his voice thin with skepticism. It is said to reflect the true emotional state and bond between those who stand before it. Prince Kalen offers this as a gift of assurance to the stability of the Nightwing Union. Elias knew the drill. This was the lie detector. He stood beside Lyra, maintaining a distance that spoke of polite formality, but his heart hammered against his ribs. Lyra, however, did not waver. She stepped closer to Elias, placing her hand lightly on his chest, exactly where his accelerated human heart was beating. She looked up at him, her crimson eyes gleaming with a perfect mix of political necessity and genuine, if dangerous, fascination. A beautiful sentiment from the prince, Lyra purred, loud enough for the hidden listeners. We shall gaze upon it then. To assure the court that our bond is authentic and whole. They both stepped in front of the mirror. In its reflection they appeared normal, the pale, armored princess and the tan, mortal husband. Then the obsidian frame began to glow faintly with a sickly green light. The mirror was sensing their emotional wavelengths. Husband, Lyra said, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper, do you fear my world? I fear losing you, princess, Elias replied instantly, locking his hazel eyes onto hers. He wasn't entirely lying. He feared being killed, and losing Lyra meant immediate death. The fear in his voice was real, but interpreted as deep concern for her. The mirror pulsed a soft, warm amber, the color of high, passionate intensity. Lyra, Elias continued, playing his part. Do you truly believe my presence here is merely an accident? Lyra's breath hitched slightly, but she held his gaze. I believe you were sent to me, Elias. To break the shackles of a fate I despised. I believe in your necessary chaos. The mirror flared bright gold. Lyra did believe this. Her hatred for her previous arranged fate was genuine, and Elias's arrival had truly broken the chains. Her political statement was built on genuine, deep-seated resentment. Valerius coughed, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The mirror was showing an undeniable, intense connection, driven by high emotion and strong necessity. It was proof of a powerful, albeit unconventional bond. Lyra gave the mirror one last triumphant glare, then turned to Valerius. The bond is consecrated. Tell Prince Kalen that my husband and I appreciate his concern for our happiness. Valerius bowed quickly, ordering the guards to remove the mirror. As soon as the door sealed, Lyra sank onto the edge of the bed, the pretense dropping instantly. That was close. The fear of death and the hatred of Kalen combined to create enough genuine intensity to fool the mirror. We are safe for now. But Kalen is not finished. Elias checked his spatial anomaly detector. It was flashing red, the energy spike far more severe than before. You're right. The veil is tearing worse. And this time it's not localized. Something is deliberately pulling at it. Lyra rushed to the ancient scroll. She scanned the lore, her crimson eyes rapidly deciphering the runes. The Shadow Walker's lore speaks of an ancient rite, a blood siphon ritual. If performed near a weakened veil, it can drain massive amounts of life energy from the Nightwing realm to fuel a hostile, single-use portal. Kalen. He wants to escape with our concentrated energy stores and open a portal to a different, less regulated mortal world, to create his own empire. Elias realized the true danger. Kalen wasn't just after Lyra's hand in marriage. He was after their clan's power and ultimate political advantage. His attack on the Veil wasn't for destruction, but for theft and escape. Where would he do this? Elias demanded, pulling out his sophisticated topographical mapping tablet. The only place with enough concealed magical conductivity is the Shattered Obelisk in the Whisper Desert. The oldest, darkest part of our realm, Lyra explained, pointing to a vast, blank area on his tablet. It's miles from the city, accessible only by flight, and only under the deepest, darkest night. Lyra immediately summoned Valerius. When the old advisor arrived, his face was pale. Princess, a report has just reached the council. Prince Kalen and his entire retinue have fled the city. They have emptied the grand vaults of the concentrated sanguine energy stores and are heading toward the Whisper Desert. The blood siphon ritual, Lyra breathed, already pulling on her armor over her wedding dress. It must not happen. If he opens that portal, the energy drain will destabilize the entire realm. Mother will blame me. You must go to the Queen, Princess, Valerius urged. Gather the elite guard. This is high treason. No time. Lyra clipped the final piece of silver armor into place. By the time the Queen and her traditional guard are mobilized, Kalen will be gone. Elias and I are faster. His tools, his iron voice, is our only chance to disrupt Kalen's magical ritual before he completes the portal. She turned to Elias, her expression resolute. We go now, husband. Your unique chaos against their ancient treachery. Can you fly? Elias slung his backpack tight and grinned, a genuine, adrenaline-fueled expression of acceptance. Not naturally, but I brought some rappelling gear and flares. I can hold on. Lyra's immense black wings snapped open, the air disturbance extinguishing the few remaining candles. She grabbed Elias, pulling him firmly against her armored chest. Hold tight, mortal. Our honeymoon is about to get significantly more deadly. With a powerful thrust, Lyra launched herself through the massive chamber window, shattering the arcane-laced glass with her wings. They soared into the perpetual twilight sky, a streak of silver armor and mortal dark fabric against the night, heading toward the treacherous Whisper Desert and the Shattered Obelisk, the site of the final confrontation. The Whisper Desert was a vast expanse of shimmering black sand and petrified, shadow-casting monoliths. The air was heavy, charged not with heat, but with raw, uncontrolled magical energy. Ahead, Lyra spotted the Shattered Obelisk, a gigantic ruined column of granite pulsing with malevolent purple light. Around its base, Prince Kalen and his Stormblood retinue were gathered, chanting in deep, guttural tones. In the center, the stolen sanguine energy stores, vials of concentrated magical essence, were arranged in a complex, glowing circle ready to be siphoned. Lyra swooped low, setting Elias down swiftly behind a cluster of jagged rocks. That circle is the core of the blood siphon ritual, Lyra hissed, her eyes scanning the dozen heavily armed Stormblood guards protecting Kalen. The ritual will open the hostile portal to the other mortal world. We must stop the chant and destroy that circle before the obelisk becomes fully charged. Elias pulled out his high-frequency transmitter, the spatial anomaly detector screaming violently. The veil is already dangerously thin right above the obelisk. My transmitter can overload the magical frequencies, but if I hit it too hard, it could destabilize the entire region, maybe collapse the veil entirely. That is a risk we must take, Lyra said, her hand resting on the hilt of her ancestral sword. I will create the diversion. I will engage Kaelin directly. While the Stormbloods are focused on me, you must get close enough to the obelisk to jam the frequency. Do not fail, Elias. If Kaelin escapes with the sanguine energy, our world is doomed. Lyra launched herself from behind the rocks with a battle cry that echoed across the desert. Her silver armor gleamed in the sickly purple light, and her massive black wings were a terrifying blur of movement. She sliced through the air, heading straight for Kaelin, drawing the immediate focus of the Stormblood guards. Treasonous dog! Lyra roared, landing amidst the chanting circle, sword flashing. Kaelin stopped chanting, his face contorted in triumphant rage. You chose the mortal, Lyra? Now watch as your folly condemns your entire realm. He drew his own massive blade and met her attack. The duel was swift and brutal, a clash of silver and iron fueled by centuries of rivalry and the immediate stakes of the realm's survival. Lyra was the more agile fighter, but Kaelin was pure brute strength, driven by resentment. Meanwhile, Elias moved quickly through the swirling chaos. The Stormblood guards were entirely focused on containing Lyra and protecting the ritual circle. Elias didn't engage them directly, he used his training. He activated a handful of smoke canisters, another tool from his surveying kit, meant for mapping wind currents. The thick, gray smoke billowed instantly, blinding the vampire guards whose vision was optimized for darkness, not smoke and bright light. Coughing and disoriented, the Stormbloods stumbled. Elias, using his night vision goggles and the thermal scope, darted through the smoke, ignoring the panicked screams. He reached the base of the shattered obelisk. Kaelin and Lyra were still locked in a desperate, deadly dance nearby. Elias pulled out the high-frequency transmitter. This wasn't a precision strike, it was a desperate Hail Mary. He had to jam the ritual's frequency without completely tearing the veil. He aimed the transmitter at the glowing sanguine energy circle and slowly increased the frequency dial. The device began to emit a piercing, inaudible wave. The purple light around the obelisk flickered. The chanting, which had resumed faintly, cracked and dissolved into sharp, painful cries. The magical energy circle around the sanguine vials began to sputter and distort. The mortal. Stop him. Kaelin shrieked, momentarily breaking away from Lyra. Kaelin lunged at Elias. Lyra saw the danger and screamed Elias's name, pushing herself between Kaelin and her husband. Kaelin's blade, meant for Elias, struck Lyra's silver armor with a deafening crash. The force threw her backward, but the ancient armor held. Elias seized the moment. He twisted the frequency dial to maximum. A terrifying explosion of sound and light erupted. The transmitter overloaded, fusing with the magical field. The purple glow around the obelisk violently vanished, replaced by a blinding surge of green and gold, the raw, uncontrolled energy of the veil. The blood siphon ritual was destroyed. The sanguine energy, instead of being funneled into a portal, was violently expelled into the atmosphere, causing a massive, painful psychic wave that incapacitated the Stormbloods and Kaelin. But the veil was now wide open. Above the shattered obelisk, the sky wasn't just torn, it was ripped apart. A swirling vortex, 10 times larger than the one that brought Elias here, spun uncontrollably, a gateway of pure dimensional chaos. Elias stared up at the vortex. The veil was destabilizing faster than he had ever seen. He checked his now useless anomaly detector. The reading wasn't just high, it was flatlining, meaning the energy was too vast to measure. He realized the prophecy was true. His iron voice had closed the ritual, but its interference had completely destabilized the ancient barrier. His presence was the poison. To save Lyra's realm, he had to leave, and he had to use his connection to the veil to stabilize it from the outside. Lyra staggered toward him, her armor dented, her eyes wide with fear for her realm. Elias, the veil, it's going to collapse the entire region. I know, Elias said, already moving toward the vortex. He retrieved a small, highly specialized GPS beacon from his backpack. A powerful, stable emitter designed for deep space navigation. My technology started this. Only my technology can end it. I have to go through and use this signal to stabilize the membrane from the other side. My constant, steady frequency should act as an anchor, closing it behind me. No. Lyra grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. If you go through that chaos, you will be consumed. The prophecy said you would be destroyed. It also said I would seal the wound, Elias countered, looking into her frantic crimson eyes. He felt a profound sense of purpose. He was not just surviving anymore, he was sacrificing. His brief, chaotic love for this terrifying, beautiful princess was the most real thing he had ever known. I may be destroyed, Lyra, but your realm will be saved. And I will close this door forever. Your realm will be safe from Kaelin's kind and from me. He kissed her fiercely, a desperate, final kiss of pure, shared intensity that echoed the high readings of the mirror of aligned hearts. He then pulled away, activated the GPS beacon, and without another word, turned and ran straight toward the roaring, swirling green and gold vortex. Elias, don't! Lyra screamed, tears of magical crimson running down her cheeks. Elias ran full speed, launching himself into the impossible chaos of the open veil. The instant he entered the vortex, a blinding flash of white light consumed the obelisk. The raging portal didn't snap shut. It slowly, agonizingly began to contract around the steady, anchoring signal of the GPS beacon Elias carried. The light receded, the roaring faded, and the tear in the sky shrank, shrinking until it was nothing more than a faint, shimmering scar, a closed wound. Elias Vance was gone. The veil was sealed. Lyra stood alone in the whispered desert, covered in dust and blood, her armor dented, her heart shattered. Kaelin and his followers were unconscious, defeated by the sonic shockwave and the magical recoil. She had won. She had defeated her rival, protected her people, and chosen her own fate. But she stood in the silence, holding the melted fragments of Elias's sabotage transmitter. She was queen, independent and safe. But she was utterly, devastatingly alone. Months later, Lyra stood on the dais of the sanguine Great Hall, crowned Queen Seraphina having gracefully, if reluctantly, abdicated after the crisis. Lyra wore the full regalia of the Nightwing sovereign, her wings magnificent, her presence absolute. Prince Kaelin and his surviving followers were exiled to the harsh, newly granted lands of the Shadow Walkers. She was Queen Lyra, fierce, respected, and solitary. She never married. She refused every suitable suitor, every arranged alliance. When asked why, she would only look toward the vast, unbroken darkness where the veil once thinned. She kept Elias's old, battered backpack, the empty, non-functional shell of his iron voice, hidden in a vault in the Midnight Tower. Sometimes, on the darkest nights, she would visit it, touching the worn fabric, remembering the warmth of the mortal who had shown her the dawn. Lyra had refused to marry the man her mother chose. But when she saw the human, she said yes, and that yes had saved her kingdom, broken her chains, and irrevocably changed her heart. She ruled, a queen defined not by her spouse, but by the love she sacrificed for her people. A solitary Nightwing queen, forever watching the sealed veil, forever waiting for a sound that could never come. 2 years had passed since Elias Vance vanished into the collapsing veil. Queen Lyra had forged the Nightwing clan into a powerful, isolated sovereign state. Her rule was cold, absolute, and undeniably successful. She had implemented Elias's logical solutions to the ancient political crises, and the realm was at peace. Yet the peace felt hollow. Lyra spent her nights not in celebrations, but in the Midnight Tower vault, staring at the empty sealed veil where the tear had been. Valerius, Lyra's aging but eternally loyal advisor, stood silently beside her. Your Majesty, the delegation from the Ironblood clan awaits your decision regarding the new trade routes. You cannot spend every night here. The veil is stable, Valerius. The Sanguine Heart's alignment is firm, Lyra murmured, touching the cool stone where the vortex had been. He did it. He kept his promise. Lyra held the salvaged, non-functional battery pack from Elias's GPS beacon. It was inert, silent. But Valerius was observant. He noticed the minute tremor in Lyra's hand, a sign of her barely contained grief. Then the impossible happened. Elias's highly sensitive spatial anomaly detector, which Elias had left behind and which Lyra kept nearby as a useless relic, let out a single, sharp beep. The screen, long dormant, flickered. The reading wasn't a powerful surge, but an incredibly faint, consistent signal. Lyra snatched the device. The readout showed a minuscule, fluctuating frequency, a steady, deliberate pulse, coming from beyond the closed veil. It was the GPS beacon. Elias was not destroyed. He was stranded on the other side, using his last bit of power to send a tiny, continuous signal, an unbroken thread. He is alive, Lyra whispered, the word a raw, desperate prayer. He is alive, Valerius. He is sending a signal. He is waiting. Valerius, the pragmatist, looked terrified. Your Majesty, even a faint signal proves the veil is merely sealed, not destroyed. We cannot reopen it. The chaos will return, Kaelin is still exiled, but his faction will rise again. We have stability. Stability is a cage, Valerius, Lyra retorted, her eyes burning with renewed purpose. I made him a promise, and I will not be a queen who breaks her word to the only man who ever truly earned it. I sealed him on the wrong side of the universe. I will unseal him. Lyra knew she could not use Elias's destructive method to open the veil again. She needed a magical equivalent of a key, not a bomb. Her only hope lay in the complete and censored ancient lore of the Shadow Walkers, which she had acquired during the trials. She spent weeks locked away, poring over the complex runes. She finally found it, a forgotten ritual, the convergence of blood and iron, a dangerous technique designed to temporarily stabilize the veil from their side by funneling an immense amount of a particular energy signature into the tear. It required two components. 1. A massive, concentrated source of sanguine energy, blood. 2. A persistent, resonating frequency from the mortal world, iron. She had the blood, but the iron, Elias's technology, was the dangerous variable. She needed an intermediary, a conduit that could safely introduce the frequency without creating chaos. She summoned the only person who understood the veil's original tear, Kalen. The exiled prince was dragged before Lyra, starved and bitter, but his eyes still held their malevolent fire. You seek my knowledge, Lyra? After you humiliated me and stole my crown? I seek to use you, Kalen, as a lesson, Lyra said coldly. You know the intricacies of the veil's instability better than anyone. I need to know how to channel a foreign frequency into the veil without causing a catastrophic collapse. Kalen sneered. You wish to bring back your mortal pet? You want to risk my entire realm for a piece of flesh? The only way is through a binding conduit, a medium that can accept the lethal frequency without dissolving. It requires a vast amount of concentrated energy and a living vessel, someone with a unique connection to both magic and the mortal world. And I, your traitorous cousin, am the only one who knows the final binding chant to stabilize the conduit. Kalen saw his opportunity. I will help you, Lyra. But only if you grant me full pardon and restore my lineage. Lyra looked at the defeated, desperate prince. She needed him. You have my word, Kalen. Help me and you will be restored to the council, but never to the throne. You are forgiven but forever bound to my service. Kalen's eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. He had survived. Lyra, Kalen, and Valerius worked in secret, preparing the grand, dangerous ritual. Kalen provided the magical equations. Lyra provided the immense sanguine energy. But they still needed the living vessel. Lyra refused to use Kalen, fearing his ultimate betrayal. Valerius was too old. The solution was blindingly simple and terrifyingly dangerous. Lyra herself. Her constant exposure to Elias and his technology, and the brief, powerful transfusion of his blood serum during the trials, had subtly altered her magical signature. She was the perfect, terrifying blend of Nightwing magic and mortal influence. Lyra addressed her final preparations to Valerius. I will be the conduit. Kalen will perform the chant. Once the veil is open, I will keep it stabilized long enough for Elias to pass through. Kalen will then have to seal it again. She entered the ritual chamber where Kalen, now fully armed and restored to his pride, stood ready with the sanguine stores. Lyra activated Elias's small, powerful GPS beacon. Its signal was amplified through a massive magical focusing crystal, the iron voice, now ready to tear the veil wide open. Kalen looked at Lyra, a genuinely conflicted look on his face. You are truly insane, princess. All for a human. I am a queen who chooses her own destiny, Kalen. Begin the chant. Kalen started the ancient, binding chant. The focusing crystal began to hum, amplifying Elias's faint signal. The crystal channeled the frequency into Lyra, who stood at the ritual focus, accepting the immense, painful energy surge. The room pulsed with a chaotic green and gold light. The air above the ritual chamber tore open. The veil was breached, not violently but as a perfect, shimmering doorway. Lyra held the portal open, her body burning with the strain of the conflicting energies. On the other side of the veil, Elias Vance, the stranded surveyor, had been living a desolate, isolated life in a remote, forgotten pocket of the mortal world. He saw the green light and the veil stabilizing as a door. He grabbed his last functioning piece of equipment, a modified high-powered flashlight, and ran through. He stumbled out of the veil and immediately saw Lyra, her armor glowing, her wings flared, her face contorted in pain as she held the portal open. And he saw Kalen, chanting fiercely, holding a ceremonial dagger, ready to sacrifice the sanguine energy. Elias, go. He will not hold the veil open for long. Lyra screamed. Elias saw the danger immediately. But before he could reach her, Kalen suddenly stopped chanting, his eyes fixed not on Lyra but on Elias. He saw the modified flashlight Elias carried. That light. Kalen hissed, his voice cold and triumphant. You brought the dawn back with you, mortal? The concentrated, burning light. This is my true prize. Kalen lunged not at Lyra, but at the focusing crystal, channeling the enormous sanguine energy not into the veil, but into Elias's flashlight. The moment the energy hit the modified flashlight, the device exploded, but not with simple force. It released a massive, blinding flash of pure, highly concentrated mortal light, magnified 1,000 times by the sanguine magic. Kalen had planned his final act, not to escape, but to weaponize the mortal world's power against the Nightwings. The blinding light engulfed the ritual chamber. Lyra screamed, shielding her eyes. Elias felt the painful, familiar burn of the mortal light. When the flash subsided, the ritual chamber was in chaos. Kalen was gone, either consumed by the feedback or having opened a brief escape route. Elias rushed to Lyra, who was curled on the floor, her armor smoking. "Lyra, are you all right?" Lyra slowly looked up, her crimson eyes wide and unfocused. She could no longer see. The intense, concentrated mortal light had burned her sensitive night vision. "I am blind, Elias," she whispered, her voice broken. "And Kalen is gone. He is loose in the mortal world with a taste for our magic, and I am defenseless." Elias held her close, a fierce, protective despair washing over him. He had returned to his love, but his return had cost her sight, and unleashed their most dangerous enemy into his own world. "You are not defenseless, Lyra," Elias vowed, his surveyor's mind already calculating. "You have me. We saved your realm, but now the hunt begins in mine. We will go back through the sealed veil. We will find Kalen on my ground and we will win the war for both worlds. Together." The story now shifts to the mortal world, where the blind vampire queen and the resourceful human must hunt a magical traitor using technology and instinct. The residual energy from Kalen's explosion had momentarily weakened the veil's seal. Elias didn't waste a second. He half-carried, half-dragged the severely injured, sightless Lyra through the rapidly closing, shimmering scar. The transition was agonizing, a painful wrenching sensation as the veil's magic violently rejected Lyra's raw, wounded energy. They landed hard in the barren, dusty landscape of the Nevada sinkhole, the very spot where Elias had first fallen 3 years ago. The sun, though veiled by the thin, smoky atmosphere of the desert dawn, was bright and brutally painful to Lyra's skin and senses. Lyra gasped, shielding her face with her armored arm. The residual light had destroyed her vision, but the mortal world's sound was an agonizing assault. Traffic hum, sirens, the distant roar of a jet, it was a cacophony that felt like physical blows to her supersensitive hearing. "We are back," Elias muttered, checking the sealed backpack he had retrieved. He quickly peeled off Lyra's shattered silver armor, leaving her in the dark, durable undersuit, and draped his own thick fleece jacket over her head to shield her from the light. "The mortal world," Lyra whispered, her voice laced with pain and disgust. "It is loud. It is chaotic. Where is Kalen?" "Unknown," Elias replied grimly, pulling out a still-functional satellite phone, a piece of technology Lyra would have dismissed as crude magic months ago. "He likely came through near here too. But he won't stick around. He has sanguine energy and a purpose now." Elias knew Kalen's mind was now infected by the lethal combination of vampire ruthlessness and the vast, unpoliced expanse of the human world. Kalen wasn't just hiding, he was building something. "Lyra, listen to me," Elias said urgently, grasping her hands. "Your strengths are now weaknesses here. The light, the noise, the speed, it will overwhelm you. But you are not defenseless. Your hearing, your smell, your raw physical power, it is all still there. We adapt. I will be your eyes and you will be my tracker." Lyra, the proud, solitary queen, felt a flash of resentment, quickly replaced by terrifying dependence. "I am queen of the Nightwing clan. I cannot rely on a mortal's vision. You are a warrior, Lyra. And right now, your survival depends on my tactical planning, and my survival depends on your instinct. That's our marriage. Now use those ears. Did Kalen fly or take a vehicle?" Lyra closed her eyes, filtering the 100 competing sounds. She focused, her senses pushing through the agonizing static. "I hear a faint, metallic groan miles away. Not an airplane. Too low. Too heavy. A large vehicle. He stole a transport." Elias checked his topographical maps. The nearest settlement is a mining town called Redemption, 40 miles south. If he took a heavy vehicle, he's heading towards the highway network. That's our lead. Elias used his last bit of cash and the satellite phone to arrange a secret, off-the-books extraction from a former military contact. A few hours later, they were in a rugged, unmarked SUV heading toward Redemption. Lyra remained covered by the jacket, relying entirely on Elias's calm, informative voice. She learned to filter the noise, locating the exact position of the engine, the speed of the wind, the texture of the seat. She was mapping the mortal world through its sensory data. To our left, Lyra, is the highway. Speeds are 70 miles per hour. Ahead the town. Looks like a gas station and a diner, Elias narrated. We are looking for evidence of concentrated sanguine energy disturbance. Lyra leaned forward, sniffing the air, which was polluted with the metallic stench of gasoline and the greasy smell of human food. I smell it. Faint but distinct. The magical residue is strongest here near the gas pumps. And an immense, overwhelming fear. A human panic. They parked a safe distance away. Elias walked toward the small rundown gas station, Lyra walking close behind him, guided by his hand on her shoulder. To any passing human, they looked like a couple on a difficult road trip, the man guiding his visually impaired partner. Elias saw the evidence instantly. A smashed lock on the station's back office door, and a trail of faint, strange, oily residue leading away. He took cash and credit cards and he siphoned the gas, Elias reported quietly. And he left a massive energy signature. Lyra, why would Kalen need cash and cards? He knows our magic is slow and traceable here, Lyra replied, her voice low and dangerous. He is adapting to mortal systems. He needs human logistics, money, fuel, anonymous travel, to move quickly across your planet. Elias looked at the oily residue. His surveyor's intuition clicked. He pulled out a small chemical analysis kit, a vial and a testing strip. He tested the strange oil. It's not oil, Lyra. It's highly concentrated sanguine energy, diluted to act as a lubricant or a marker. He's deliberately leaving a faint trail of his own power to mislead anyone who might track him magically. He wants us to follow him. Then we follow, Lyra hissed. He is leading us into a trap, but he is also leading us to his goal. Where does this residue trail lead, Elias? Elias looked up, scanning the open, vast mortal sky. It leads away from the major cities, out into the silence. Towards the massive, interconnected network of radio towers and satellite dishes in the central part of the continent. If Kalen wants to truly weaponize our energy, he needs to amplify it globally. He needs human communication technology. Elias knew he couldn't simply track Kalen on the highway. Kalen was using human systems, but with vampire speed and resources. Elias had to use his own systems to counter him. They holed up in a cheap, secluded motel room. Lyra, curled in the dark bathroom, worked on controlling the agonizing noise. Elias spent hours on his repaired satellite phone, accessing encrypted channels to contact his old military network, claiming he needed access to deep-level satellite imaging for a sensitive geological project. He finally got the data. A high-resolution image of a remote, decommissioned military communications base in the middle of a massive desert plain. Lyra, Elias said, pointing to the screen, describing the image in precise detail. This is Kalen's target. The Project Citadel base. It has a massive old-generation radio amplification array, a network of enormous satellite dishes meant for deep space communication. If he channels the stolen sanguine energy through that array, he could blast the entire mortal world's communication grid with a frequency that would instantly paralyze your realm. He could create a global man-made veil of chaos. Lyra straightened immediately, her blindness forgotten. He is using your world's own voice against it. He seeks to weaponize silence. Suddenly, the motel room door splintered inward with explosive force. Two figures, pale and fast, stood in the frame. They were not Kalen, but high-ranking Stormblood followers, armed with human weaponry and clearly adapted to the mortal world. The prince knew you would follow the scent, Queen Lyra, one Stormblood sneered, raising an assault rifle. And you walk straight into the trap, the other finished, aiming at Elias. Lyra's blindness was instantly irrelevant. She heard the change in the air pressure, the specific sound of the safety mechanisms clicking off the rifles, and the rapid pounding rhythm of their hearts. Gun 6 feet to the right, slightly elevated, Lyra hissed, pointing. Elias, moving faster than he ever had, used his knowledge of the motel room to his advantage. He grabbed the heavy cast-iron lamp beside the bed and hurled it not at the Stormblood, but at the light fixture above them. The light bulb exploded, plunging the room into darkness. For the Stormbloods, it was momentary confusion. For Lyra it was home. She launched herself forward, guided by the sound of the Stormblood's panicked breathing and pounding hearts. Crack. Lyra's raw vampiric strength connected with the first Stormblood's jaw. The sound of shattered bone was sickeningly loud. The second Stormblood fired wildly, the bullet missing Elias's head by inches. Elias, using the flash of the muzzle as a temporary light source, tackled the vampire, pinning the rifle arm. Where is Kalen? Lyra roared, her voice a low, terrifying growl as she pinned the first vampire beneath her knee. The Stormblood gasped, terrified of the sightless queen. Citadel. Project Citadel. He is activating the main array. Lyra finished her interrogation with a final brutal snap of the neck. Elias released the second vampire, who fainted from terror and pain. He looked at Lyra, covered in grime and blood, her face a mask of terrible beauty and resolve. The Citadel base is 300 miles from here, deep in the desert, Elias said, grabbing the keys to the SUV. We have hours. But Kalen has a head start and a clear objective. We are going to drive Lyra. And we are going to stop a vampire queen's rejected suitor from collapsing the entire mortal world's communication system. Lyra placed her hand firmly on his arm. Her crimson eyes, though sightless, looked straight ahead. Let's drive, husband. I will guide you by the beating of his distant heart. The SUV tore through the desolate, scrub-filled roads of the American Southwest. The sun, a searing, inescapable presence even through the tinted windows, was a constant agony for Lyra, forcing her to remain hooded and wrapped in Elias's jacket. Elias drove hard and fast, pushing the stolen vehicle to its limits. Status report, Lyra, Elias commanded, his eyes glued to the endless asphalt. Kalen's energy signature. How close? Lyra sat beside him, rigid and focused. Her blindness had forced a terrifying evolution in her senses. She didn't just hear the world, she felt the magnetic and acoustic textures of space. The constant high-frequency hum of the SUV's electronics, the distant rumble of thunder, the subtle electrical distortion in the air, all provided her with an inverted, sonar-like map of their surroundings. He is perhaps 2 hours ahead, Lyra reported, her voice low and strained. His trail is strong, pulsing with concentrated sanguine energy. He is not hiding now, he is broadcasting his intention. He is using the energy not only for transport but to power his communication system, perhaps accessing your financial networks for further resources. Elias nodded grimly. Kalen, the political schemer, had transformed into a global terrorist, leveraging the ultimate resources of both worlds. The Citadel base is heavily protected, even decommissioned, Elias explained, tapping his GPS screen. Fences, sensor systems, perimeter alarms. If he's setting up the array, he'll have guards. We can't rely on brute force, we need subterfuge. I'll use my old access codes to breach the perimeter, but we will have to move in complete silence. Lyra scoffed quietly. Silence is my weapon now, Elias. But yours is sound. Describe the Citadel. Elias began a detailed description of the military base from the satellite images. The height of the perimeter fence, the distance between the guard towers, the orientation of the colossal satellite dishes. Lyra absorbed every metric, building a complex, three-dimensional auditory map in her mind. Tell me about the wind patterns, Lyra asked. The heat signatures in the towers. Elias was surprised. The wind is steady, quartering from the south. The guard towers, they'd be running on generators, Lyra. They'll have massive heat signatures, impossible to miss. Exactly, Lyra affirmed. Your thermal scope is useless in daylight, but the heat of those generators provides me with an auditory beacon. I will use the sound of their heat, the specific thrum of the machinery, to pinpoint the guards' locations, even through the desert wind. They were becoming a terrifyingly effective unit. Elias, the pragmatic soldier and navigator, providing the data. Lyra, the blind vampire queen, processing that data through her mutated, hyper-developed senses to achieve lethal precision. As they neared the Citadel, the road became rougher and less traveled. Elias stopped the SUV 3 miles from the perimeter fence, covering the vehicle with desert netting. We walk from here, Elias whispered. The silence will be our shield. Lyra, you lead. Lyra, still hooded, stepped out onto the hot sand. She took a deep breath, concentrating. The normal human world static faded, replaced by the low, complex songs of the desert, the whisper of the sand, the click of the insects, and the distant, deep mechanical pulse of the Citadel's generators. She extended her hand, and Elias instinctively took it, placing himself slightly behind her. Lyra began to move, slowly, deliberately, but with a terrifying confidence. She wasn't stumbling, she was navigating by sound and vibration, avoiding every brittle bush and loose rock that would have betrayed their presence. They reached the high perimeter fence. Elias produced specialized wire cutters from his pack. The primary fence is electrified, he whispered. I need 20 seconds to cut the power conduit 10 feet up. 10 seconds, Lyra corrected, her voice barely audible. She pressed her bare palm against the fence. The electrical current is being fed by a minor sanguine shunt. Kalen is enhancing the defenses. Your cutters will fuse. Wait. She withdrew her hand, then pressed her fingers against the fence again, targeting a small, weak point in the magical current. She focused her own wounded, residual energy, the energy that had held the veil open, into the point. Flicker. The fence's electrical current died. Lyra had momentarily negated Kalen's defensive enhancement. Now Elias, she commanded. Elias cut a neat, clean section of the fence and they slipped through the gap. They were inside the perimeter. They moved toward the main complex. Lyra's auditory beacon led them unerringly to the first guard tower. 2 guards inside. One near the radio, one near the window sipping a soda. I hear the subtle sound of the carbonation, Lyra reported instantly. Their heart rates are slow, complacent. They will be taken down silently. Lyra moved like a shadow. Elias followed, ready to engage the moment she struck. The fight was over before it began. 2 quick, silent movements in the darkness of the tower's base. Lyra's mastery over her new environment was absolute, precise, and lethally efficient. They reached the massive radio array, a colossal semicircle of enormous, dish-shaped antennas aimed toward the heavens. At the center, in a reinforced control bunker, Kalen stood, dressed in human tactical gear, surrounded by the remnants of the sanguine energy stores and a complex web of wiring he had integrated into the array's mainframe. "We are too late," Lyra hissed, hearing the rising, familiar hum of massive energy being channeled. Kalen was already transmitting. "Lyra Nightwing. I knew you would follow your pathetic human pet." Kalen's voice, amplified by the base's external speakers, boomed across the desert. "I am not here to destroy this pitiful world, cousin. I am here to control it. By channeling the sanguine energy through this massive antenna, I will inject a powerful, mind-numbing frequency into every human communication system, telephones, televisions, internet. I will create a global psychological veil. The humans will become complacent, controllable, and utterly dependent on my communications. I will rule both worlds, the Nightwing realm through threat, and the mortal world through dependency." Kalen laughed maniacally. "And now you and your husband will watch it happen." Elias knew Kalen's plan was infinitely more dangerous than simple destruction. Total psychological control. "Lyra, the main array is transmitting. We have to destroy the main transmitter modulator, the core component of the array. It's too reinforced to destroy with a knife," Elias shouted. Lyra, hearing the frantic beat of Kalen's heart inside the bunker, looked up at the towering steel of the array. "I cannot see the modulator, Elias. You must guide me precisely." "It's on the main dish, 50 feet up. A thick, rectangular box, heavily shielded." Lyra did not hesitate. Her obsidian wings, folded tight, snapped open, scattering sand and dust. "I need a distraction. A massive sound." Elias pulled out a handful of flares, the magnesium flares he had used in the trials. He hurled them at the metal fencing, creating a sudden, blinding, ear-splitting flash and crackle of noise. Kalen, momentarily distracted, covered his ears. Lyra used the momentary sonic chaos as cover. She launched herself into the sky, powered by her immense wings and guided only by Elias's shouted directions and the specific thrum of the electrical currents leading to the modulator. 10 feet. The sound is increasing, Elias yelled. Lyra soared upward, striking a vertical steel beam, using her talons to hold tight. She located the modulator by the low, high-frequency whine it emitted. She plunged her hand not through the shield, but through a small, exposed power conduit nearby, channeling her remaining raw, wounded magic into the junction. Kaboom! The modulator exploded in a shower of sparks and fused metal. The massive, mind-numbing transmission ceased instantly. The gigantic satellite dishes, now powerless, slowly ground to a halt. Lyra dropped to the ground, exhausted, her wings trailing in the dust. Kalen erupted from the bunker, screaming in pure, defeated fury. He lunged at Elias, dagger drawn. "You will pay for destroying my empire, mortal." Elias, relying on pure instinct and the adrenaline of the serum, sidestepped the attack. He didn't fight Kalen. He used his human environment. He pulled the pin on a flashbang grenade he had retrieved from the guard tower and tossed it directly at Kalen's feet. The detonation was deafening. Kalen, already weakened and blinded by the flash, stumbled backward, roaring in agony. Lyra heard the fall. She moved instantly, guided by the sound of Kalen's writhing. She placed her booted foot on his chest, her blade, now drawn, at his throat. "You chose to weaponize my heart and your envy, Kalen," Lyra stated, her voice icy and absolute. "Now you lose both your throne and your life." Elias watched, his heart heavy, as the blind queen delivered justice to her defeated rival, executing Kalen with a final, swift movement. The war was over. Lyra stood up, wiping the blade clean. She turned her sightless face toward Elias. "We won, Elias Vance. Your world is safe and my kingdom is secure. The veil remains sealed, but my purpose here is done." She reached out, finding his hand in the dark. "But I am blind and I am queen of the night. I need my light and my kingdom needs its leader." You are my light husband. You are the eyes of dawn. We return home. Together. But this time we return on our terms. Elias looked at the vast, silent desert. He knew his world was now too small for him. He was no longer just a surveyor. He was a king consort, the eyes of a powerful queen, and the only bridge between two worlds. We go home, Lyra, he said, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Let's find the weakest point in the desert, find the right frequency, and open our door again.